Apparently, I gotta give something to the other side of the brain. A short time ago, I was on the streets and I ventured upon this library in the park. It's like a public library thing. People put books and you can read them in the park here in Dallas. And I found an old biography of Nancy Reagan. Now, I've discussed this biography several times. This was allegedly an official biography of Nancy Reagan. And the great part about it is it had an annex in the back. It had all of these official communications about and involving Nancy Reagan. It was fascinating to read the various events of Nancy Reagan's life, including how Nancy Reagan responded when Ronald Reagan was shot, including things that Nancy Reagan did during Ronald Reagan's campaign for president, the first campaign for president. So, a variety of things that Nancy Reagan did that were very unique in the course of being the First Lady. And it was very inspiring to me in a very significant manner that is not something that has been matched by any subsequent First Lady. Something happened after Nancy Reagan and Ronald Reagan left the White House, and First Ladies after that just haven't done the same thing that Nancy did. One of the things I learned that was fascinating to me is that Nancy had what I believe was a kind of prophetic streak. Not just because she consulted astrologers as part of like this California starlet thing, not like that. She one day was there's a recounting in this biography about a person who actually worked on the White House staff under Ronald Reagan. He was one of Ronald Reagan's staffers. He was involved in some sort of national security role. And he recounted having a conversation with Nancy Reagan where she was telling him about this dream she had that was very concerning to her. It involved a red haired woman and this appearance of this red haired woman, and she described it to him in a particular way. It's ironic because in this official biography of Nancy Reagan, the only quote from this specific staff person of Ronald Reagan's is when he's recounting Nancy Reagan sharing with him her dream. Now, this was a dream she had prior to the visit by the Gorbachevs to the White House. And there's another part in there that describes a lot of very significant and very important details about what happened when the Gorbachevs visited the White House. See, one of the things that was very important to Nancy was this kind of lady who was very, very into the details of what happened with the estate, the White House estate. She would bother the White House chef. She had to check out every meal before they had these. They were known for having these dinner parties. And before they had these dinner parties, she had to look over the recipe. She had to consult on the recipe. She had to make her own plating recommendations. She had a friend, actually, and she and her friend, before every major dinner party, would make the White House chef prepare the full meal, and then they would sit down and they took notes about the meal. They took notes about what was served. They took notes about the plating. And then they would tell him, oh, you need to change this. And apparently, there was some turf there because it's like he's the White House chef. And here's the First Lady trying to tell him, I don't like the way you did this, or you need to do it differently. She's the First Lady, right? And she had a friend, and her friend, every time they had a major meal, would meticulously plan the plating. They would plan the actual meal, go through their own, run through, their own role play, I guess, before the actual meal came. And so there was very significant things about every meal, very important things about every meal that she took notes on. So somewhere there exists a First Lady's archive. I've contended for a long time that there is a specific First Lady archive. Just like there's a presidential archive. If you're the president, you get access to the private notes from the presidents before you. I can only friggin' imagine what you fucking find in there. I don't even want to think about what happened in the last 30 years with the presidential archive. I really don't. But then you also got the First Lady archive, which is why the concept of a woman president, especially if she's a heterosexual woman president, is very important, because then that means she's going to be the wife of the first gentleman, which means it's not just her being the first woman in a line of succession of men. It's that her partner, her spouse, is going to be the first man in a line of succession of women. And he's going to get access to the First Lady's archive. And somewhere in that First Lady's archive, I imagine, are lots of these notes that Nancy Reagan took on these dinner parties, including the dinner party with the Gorbachevs. And the reason I mention this is because of that dream. See, back in this day, we didn't know about Pluto. We didn't know that Pluto had 3 moons, and that one of those moons was almost half the size of Pluto itself. We didn't know that back in the day. We didn't know that in a particular manner of photographing Pluto, that Pluto and Chiron, the moon, the major moon of Pluto, both appear to have polar caps that are almost like a frozen water or frozen liquid that are red, bright red. They have bright red caps. Not just Pluto, but also the major moon of Pluto. And if you think about the American nuclear family model, what is it? It's usually a father and a mother and 2 kids, right? 2.4 kids or whatever. But by and large, the nuclear family, the American nuclear family, was a mother and a father and 2 kids, just like Pluto. But that's not how we understood Pluto. Pluto, for many, many years, was deemed to be that cold, old planet of the underworld, way, way, way out on the periphery, distant from the sun, understood to be alone, understood to be cold. And what was projected on the Pluto in terms of its relationship to the cosmos and what it did to our solar system and how that energy, that planetary energy impacted us on Earth and how we were supposed to resonate with it, had a specific kind of characterization. But I believe that what this man was communicating is that Nancy Reagan has some sort of intuition and understood that part of the cycles of Pluto, which for a long time have been associated with massive changes, right? And it's one of these things, is it going to be a revolution? Is it going to be a fascist, dictatorship? Different parts of the cycle of Pluto end up correlating with these massive paradigm shifts on Earth. And that I believe he was actually recounting, he understood that she had some sort of prophecy of something very important about the movement of Pluto and about how the Plutonic energy, the energy of Pluto, was going to impact the Earth and especially the United States. And so when she was communicating this dream to him, as she was letting him know, she had almost like a prophecy. And I believe that is why she was so disturbed by the visit that the Gorbachevs made to the White House. You should read it if you can. Find the information about Nancy Reagan's recounting of the dinner with the Gorbachevs. It was incredibly disturbing. It's like you read her biographer discussing how the meeting, how that dinner went, and you could almost see her grating. You can almost see, it's almost like the sound of Mrs. Gorbachev's voice was grating on her nerves. It was impacting her ether. That Nancy Reagan's ether was very, very disturbed just by the sound of Raisa Gorbachev's voice. Now, did Raisa Gorbachev know this and intend for that? I mean, you'd have to ask her. But I think that part of what was happening is that she represented a certain kind of appearance of Pluto in Nancy Reagan's cosmoverse. And by virtue of Nancy Reagan being the First Lady of the United States, that said something about the role of Pluto and the Plutonic energy in what was to unfold as America's destiny. And I think this is incredibly important because now we're in a very important phase in consideration of whatever Nancy Reagan's prophecy was related to that dream. And now we're in a situation where the man in the White House doesn't want to reveal his tax forms. If you remember, and if you're the kind of person who knows about this, Ronald Reagan was under a lot of pressure during his first presidential campaign to show his tax forms because Jimmy Carter had presented his tax forms. And when Ronald Reagan decided to present his tax forms, which was not required, but there was a decision whether he would or he wouldn't. He did do it. He decided to do it. And then Nancy Reagan had to take a very specific and important role in responding to what it meant for him to reveal his tax records and also for it to, emanate in the American public, for it to manifest in terms of an understanding of what it meant that the president was providing his tax record. And this is what it said, right? The role that Nancy Reagan took in that specific element of the campaign was very telling about a lot of what characterized the Reagan campaign. So then on another level, The other end of that was the role that Nancy played in her capacity as the first lady, a specific kind of first lady who had this kind of intuitive aspect to her. And so, what did it mean that Raisa Gorbachev and Mikhail Gorbachev were in the White House when they were? What happened happened, and now it's 2020, and now we have who's the president, who's the first lady. It's almost like Nancy Reagan's prophecy came true. Nancy Reagan's prophecy came true. What are we doing with it? Where are we in terms of understanding our relationship of our projection onto Pluto? See, I've contended for many years, even before there was confirmation that was broadcast back to Earth, when the satellites were able to get out to Pluto and broadcast back to us actual definitive images of Pluto and its moons, that I've contended we got it all wrong about Pluto. And Pluto has been trying to communicate with us for at least 10 years, at least since 2008, 2009, that we mischaracterized Pluto. We got it all wrong about Pluto. And Pluto wants us to open up to a different understanding. And I think that there are others, especially others in the astrophysics sector and in the space research sector, that knew, or at least had intuitions, or at least had other kinds of evidence that they weren't able to verify until they got these actual pictures broadcast back, that there was, in fact, a completely different understanding and characterization of Pluto. That, in fact, part of what we were picking up on unconsciously in terms of defining our nuclear model was actually coming from Pluto. But because we had projected onto Pluto all of these different elements, including the concepts of the aging, right? That Pluto is characterized as a man, a male figure, involved with the underworld, involved with the unconscious and the darkness that we don't really want to see or examine, right? And it's a man at the end of his life, at least in terms of our understanding of time frames. It's a man of retirement age that's involved in some sort of subterranean subtext, right? And in the course of that, what is the relationship of that kind of characterization to Pluto, to the feminine? Well, then we want to project it onto Venus, right? And the relationship that Venus had in proximity to or in relation to Pluto. Well, what if that's not the case? What if that's not who Pluto was? What if that's not even who Venus was? Because then we're crazed. Then we're like totally freaked out. Because not only did we get it wrong about Pluto, we got it wrong about Venus. Because apparently Pluto's out there, and Pluto has 3 moons, one of which is half the size, almost half the size of Pluto. Nowhere else is that. And it's very similar in composition to Pluto. It's almost like a mate. It has a mate, and it has 2 other moons as well. Well, in the animal kingdom, the natural universe on our planet, what kind of resonates with that? Well, there are parts of the natural experience on Earth where the female is larger than the male, sometimes substantially larger than the male. And the female can also, have a relationship with that kind of, arrangement in their natural verse, where she is the assertive one. And she's very loyal, and she's monogamous in a way that's not expected of other kinds of natural occurring life on Earth. And so I think that this is a big deal of what this transition is about on the planet. When we talk about this concept of the feminine, what we've done is we eliminated Pluto as a planet. Why? This was a strategic political decision. And the question has to be asked, who decided on that? Who supports that? Because it's completely based on a misrepresentation of who and what Pluto was to begin with. It's not even about whether or not it qualifies from some technical perspective as a planet. It was a political decision to exclude Pluto. Why? And then from there, we can address better this situation we've got going on with the nuclear family of America, which is very different than what it was when Nancy Reagan and Ronald Reagan were in the White House, right? I'm just saying.